Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're going to talk about one of the most overlooked pieces of mule deer habitat that consistently holds deer across the West: edge habitat. Most hunters spend their time glassing big basins, hiking deep into timber, or focusing on one type of terrain. But mature mule deer rarely live in just one type of environment. They survive by positioning themselves where multiple habitats meet, where they can feed, see danger, and escape pressure without traveling far. That transition zone, where open country meets cover, where feeding areas touch security, where two terrain types collide, is what we call edge habitat. And once you start recognizing it, you'll learn something important. A lot of the mule deer hunters struggle to find every season are actually living right along those edges. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent mule deer hunter and outdoorsman. Today, we're going to break down what edge habitat is, why mule deer rely on it, and how you can use it to consistently find more deer in Western country. Edge habitat is one of the most important concepts a mule deer hunter can understand, yet it's rarely explained clearly. In simple terms, edge habitat is the place where two different types of terrain or vegetation meet. It might be where a sage flat transitions into a patch of timber, or where an open hillside meets thick brush, or where a grassy feeding slope blends into dark bedding cover. Those transition zones create a natural boundary between environments, and mule deer are drawn to them because they offer multiple advantages at the same time. Instead of living deep in one type of habitat, deer can position themselves right along the edge and take advantage of everything around them. For example, a mule deer might bed just inside thick cover where it feels secure, but step only a short distance into an open slope to feed. That edge gives the deer access to food, visibility, and escape routes without requiring it to travel far. And that's exactly why edge habitat consistently produces deer sightings across Western landscapes. Mule deer are creatures of efficiency and security. They naturally gravitate towards places where they can meet their needs while minimizing their risk. Once you begin recognizing those transition zones on the landscape, you're going to start realizing how often mule deer structure their daily lives around those edges. Mule deer are built for survival in open country, but they rarely spend their entire day fully exposed. Instead, they position themselves where they can balance visibility, food, and security, and edge habitat gives them exactly that balance. Out in the wide open, mule deer can see danger coming from long distances. Their eyesight is one of the greatest defenses they have, but the downside of open terrain is that it also exposes them to predators and hunters. On the other hand, thick cover provides safety, shade, and protection from the wind, but it limits visibility and can trap scent in ways that make detecting danger more difficult for them. Edge habitat solves that problem. When mule deer live along those transition zones, they can bed in security while still remaining aware of the landscape around them. A buck might bed just inside the cover of scattered timber or brush where his body is hidden, but his eyes can still watch the open slope below. From that position, he can monitor feeding areas, detect movement from long distances, and escape quickly if something feels wrong. This combination of visibility and protection is exactly why mule deer repeatedly choose edge habitat across Western terrain. It gives them the ability to survive while still accessing the resources they need every day. One of the biggest reasons mule deer rely on edge habitat is because it allows them to meet multiple survival needs without traveling very far. When you look closely at where deer spend their time, you're often going to find that the best locations combine food, security, and visibility all within a short distance of each other. Feeding areas in Western country are often found in more open terrain, right? Places like sagebrush flats, grassy slopes, alpine basins, or south-facing hillsides where vegetation all grows really well. Those areas provide the groceries mule deer need, but they don't always offer much protection. That's where nearby cover becomes important. If a feeding area sits right next to thicker vegetation, broken timber, brush patches, or rugged terrain, mule deer can move only a short distance to reach security. They can feed in the open during low light hours and slip back into nearby cover to bed during the day. Edge habitat also gives mule deer the ability to watch their surroundings. When deer bed along those transitions, they can often see into country while keeping their bodies partially hidden. And that positioning allows them to detect predators early while still maintaining quick access to food and escape routes nearby. Edge habitat doesn't just influence where mule deer live either. It also shapes how they move across the landscape from day to day. Once you start paying attention to those transition zones, you're going to notice that mule deer rarely move randomly through open country. Instead, they tend to travel along edges rather than straight across terrain. This happens because edges offer both security and awareness. Hey, if you're serious about becoming a more consistent mule deer hunter, I built a mule deer hunting series of ebooks to walk you through my entire process step by step. This is a 7-volume system designed specifically for Western hunters pursuing mule deer in real mountain and public land environments. In Volume 1, Foundations and Reality, you're going to learn how to understand how mule deer actually live, the myths that mislead most hunters, and the mindset required for consistent success. In Volume 2, Finding Mule Deer and Understanding Pressure, you're going to learn how mule deer move across the landscape and how hunting pressure changes their behavior. In Volume 3, Terrain, Aspect, and Positioning, you're going to learn how to read mule deer country and position yourself correctly using terrain and wind. In Volume 4, Glassing, Visual Discipline, and Buck Identification, you're going to learn how to find mule deer, glass efficiently, and identify mature bucks. In Volume 5, Early Season and High Country Strategy, you're going to learn how to hunt velvet and early season bucks in alpine terrain. In Volume 6, Rut, Transition, and Late Season Movement, we're going to talk about understanding migration, cold weather movement, and how bucks shift through the season. And in Volume 7, Execution and Decision Stacking, we're going to talk about how to close the distance, execute under pressure, and make disciplined decisions during the stalk. If you want to hunt mule deer with structure instead of guesswork, you can buy them individually, or you can bundle all the volumes together and save 50% off the entire mule deer hunting series of ebooks at backboneunlimited.com. When a mule deer moves along a habitat edge, it can keep one side of its body protected by cover while still watching open ground for danger. And that combination makes travel safer than just walking through the exposed terrain or deeper dense cover. For example, a buck feeding in open sage might move uphill along the line where sagebrush meets scattered timber, and that edge allows him to feed, watch the hillside below, and slip into cover the moment something feels wrong. That same pattern happens in many types of terrain, too. Deer often follow the line where timber meets open basins, or where brush meets grass, or where broken rock meets vegetation. Those edges naturally guide their movement. And because of this, mule deer travel routes frequently follow the boundaries between habitats rather than just cutting through the middle of them. Hunters who recognize those patterns can often predict where deer are going to move long before they ever see them. One of the biggest advantages modern deer hunters have is the ability to recognize productive terrain before ever stepping onto the mountain. When you're studying maps or digital scouting tools, edge habitat often becomes visible once you start looking for transitions between terrain types. On most mapping platforms, those transitions are going to appear where vegetation patterns change or where terrain features shift abruptly. For example, you might see the boundary where dark timber meets open slopes, or where sagebrush flats transition into broken hillsides, or where alpine basins meet bands of scattered trees. Those lines are not random. They represent the places where mule deer can move between feeding areas and security cover without exposing themselves for long periods of time. Another thing to watch for is elevation transitions. Mule deer often position themselves along edges where vegetation changes with elevation, such as the line where thick timber begins to thin into open slopes or where shrubs give way to grass. South-facing slopes that border north-facing timber can also create excellent edge habitat. The open slope might produce better forage, and the shaded timber nearby offers bedding. When you begin to study maps with this perspective, you're going to start seeing these transition zones everywhere, and a lot of them consistently hold mule deer year after year. When I'm hunting mule deer on public land, edge habitat is one of the very first things I look for when evaluating a new area. Instead of focusing only on big basins or obvious feeding areas, I like to pay close attention to where feeding terrain meets security cover because that transition is where deer naturally spend most of their time. My goal is to identify edges that connect bedding cover with nearby food. A classic example of this would be a sage or grass feeding slope that borders scattered timber, brush patches, or broken terrain where deer can bed during the day. Mule deer often feed out in the open early and then late, then shift only a short distance back towards cover as the day progresses. From a hunting standpoint, that edge becomes the zone where deer travel between those two needs. When I'm glassing, I focus heavily on those transition lines instead of just starting in the middle of open country. Deer frequently appear along the edges because that's where they feel comfortable moving. I also pay close attention to wind and approach routes. Positioning above or to the side of those edges often allows me to glass feeding areas while staying out of the main travel line deer are using. Edge habitat is one of the simplest concepts in mule deer hunting, but it's also one of the most powerful once you understand it. Mule deer don't survive by living randomly across the landscape. They survive by positioning themselves where they can feed, stay secure, and monitor their surroundings all at the same time. That's exactly what edge habitat provides. When two types of terrain meet, open feeding areas and protective cover, you create a natural zone where mule deer can move efficiently while maintaining safety. Those transition lines allow deer to step out to feed, retreat quickly into cover, and keep watch over the landscape. That's your money spot. For hunters, recognizing those edges changes the way you evaluate country. Instead of just searching huge areas blindly, you're going to start to focus on the specific zones where mule deer naturally spend their time. And once you start identifying edge habitat on the map and in the field, you're going to notice something important. A lot of the deer hunters struggle to find are often living right along those edges. Now, if you want to go deeper into mule deer movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the Mule Deer Hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how deer actually use country and how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of mule deer resources, private discussions, and direct communication to me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is not a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. I appreciate all of you. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.